Yeah, go on, go for it.
Go on then. Good morning, all. So thank you very much for joining us for our new webinar, Is Your Business Connectivity Letting You Down? A very, very interesting topic. Hope it will be. So this is John Redding. Obviously, you know him, the boss of Octopus Computers, and myself, Romy. We're gonna cover, like I said, different topics. Can you move the slide, John, please? Today, so as you can see, it's gonna be a few topics about like different connectivity options, why fast broadband doesn't always mean best performance, Wi-Fi and coverage explain, what affects Wi-Fi quality, and also telecoms and cloud calling. Basically, we'll try to give you most keys that you can use on your day-to-day life with your Wi-Fi that you can do yourself. Make sure you use the things that you already have the best way possible. And of course, if you have any questions, please do ask them in the chat. We have also a little Q&A bit, which is at the top, I think, somewhere of your screen, if you do want other people to see the questions you're asking. But yeah, we're gonna crack on. John, all yours.
Perfect. So today's one's a weird blend compared to what we normally do, in that in order to understand and explain some of these topics, we're going to have to get a little bit more technical than we normally do in some of these webinars. So I'll try and not be too nerdy. If I am drifting that way, Romy, can I ask you to yell at me?
I will.
And like, just bring it down a bit, but that's fine. I'll try and be good. I'm normally pretty good at translating these. Um, so to throw us into the deep end, I'm going to start with acronyms, which IT is full of. We're going to talk through these different connectivity options, which I think is the fundamental piece. Now, if you're in a serviced office, most of this is handled for you, or at least in that office environment, but it's still true pretty much everywhere. Now, traditionally, we had classic broadband, which would be not even fiber to the cabinet. That would have been, well, first dial-up when I was growing up, and then broadband. Broadband because they could send a broader channel across the copper cables. What they then did is they ran fiber cables to the cabinet, which is the green BT boxes you see on the side of the road. The fiber optics are going to them, and you would have copper going out from those to your house, which is FTTC, fiber to the cabinet. Step above that is FTTP, which is fiber to the premises. That's where there is a fiber cable going not just to the cabinet, but from the cabinet to you. Now, there's also one above that again called a leased line, which I've not put on here. Leased lines are dedicated, so it's a not shared connectivity to the internet. FTTP, while very fast, is often a shared line between a number of different users or different companies. Leased line is dedicated to your own. There aren't a lot of use cases anymore for a full lease line. It tends to be if it's coming into you and you're selling it out to others, or if there's a particularly strong reason you need it, as in a lot of users for that account that we'll come on to. So they are the different options that you can pick up from a classic broadband or internet perspective. Outside of that, as I'm sure everyone is now aware, you can get mobile broadband and SIM connectivity, especially with the rise of 4G, 5G, they're ever getting faster. So you can often have home routers, for example. A lot of BT hubs now come with a SIM card in the back of them, or at least a USB stick, where it will also start doing things. So that's an option for you. Outside of that, you can also have a Starlink, which is effectively satellites, but Starlink's the most commonly known one. We actually use it for our Uppingham office. Our head office has Starlink connectivity and broadband as a backup. So the way that works, the Starlink is a subscription with everyone's favorite tech person, Elon Musk. I say favorite in air quotes, but he owns Starlink, and it's pretty good actually. So we found that the connectivity is very good. You get an app to scan for the satellites in the sky. It aligns the dish for you. It works really well. What I would say is on a personal connection, it's very good. You get a pretty reasonable cost rate on it. For a business, it's extremely expensive because they charge per gigabyte of data usage. And if you're in the position of needing it, it's already cost prohibitive. I've mentioned backup internet options there because I think a lot of people misunderstand what that means. Nowadays, I feel a lot of companies can't work without internet. I think that's a fair assumption. We're on a video call now, but if it were to go offline, there's very little you can do from an email, phone, operational perspective. The mistake a lot of companies make, though, is they will take two orders with the same carrier. So their backup internet option will be the same as their main. For example, 2 lines from BT. Well, that doesn't really help you. You see, if the connection into the building goes wrong, you're probably on the same connection twice. Bear in mind that FTTC perspective, FTTP, so whether it's to the cabinet or to the premises, it might be 2 different fiber lines to the premises, but if the cabinet fails in any way, you're stuffed regardless. At the same time, if there's a BT outage and both your lines are with BT, so BT is what's known as the carrier or the ISP, that's the internet service provider, and BT go off, you're still stuffed. Your backup is offline at the same time. So as a minimum, we recommend that you take your backup service, if you are going to have one, with a different carrier or a different ISP. At that point, speak to a nerd because it's important to understand which ISPs run off which carriers. I told you it'd be technical, so sorry. But effectively, Openreach is a monopoly, an evil corporation that owns all the copper in the ground. So people like TalkTalk, PlusNet, Utility Warehouse, they all use the same infrastructure. So they all use OpenReach. There are exceptions. So actually Lightspeed run their own. I believe Up run their own. Virgin is a distinct network in itself. So if you are going to look at having a failover or a separate line, make sure it's on a different carrier or a different ISP proper, as opposed to using the same infrastructure. Your other option, of course, is to have a SIM failover. So like one of these EE boxes, about yay big, put a SIM card in them as a backup. Have decent mobile signal on your phone, of course. There's no point doing it with no mobile signal. Or have a Starlink as an option, which you'd only use or subscribe to when something goes wrong. It did happen about 5 years ago in Stamford. The fair came to town as they were pitching one of their lovely constructed rides, which I'm sure were really solid. They drove the pole through the fibre to the cabinet cable, literally pierced the entire thing, took everyone offline for 3 days, because that's not a quick job to fix. So backups are important, and the impact can be quite large if you don't have any connectivity. But they're just to give you the top level. We'll come back to a lot of these terms, I suspect, as we go on, but they are different connectivity options you can play with. What we then get asked is, well, I've got fibre to the premises. Why is my internet slow? Or what's going on with it? Why isn't it faster? Those kinds of questions. Now, we're going to talk quite a bit about Wi-Fi separately. Why? I put an extra H in there, but Wi-Fi separately. But instead, we'll start with just connectivity in terms of why fast broadband or fast internet doesn't necessarily mean everything's running quickly. And that's because the connection into the building, that is from the cabinet or fibre to the premises piece to the actual demarcation point, normally the BT box on the wall, is only one piece of a larger puzzle. You've got the internal network, which is your LAN or local area network, which is how all of your devices talk to each other and talk to the router and see each other. It's how you can print, it's how you can do all of these things. We often see problems with Wi-Fi coverage, which we'll come on to. There may be limitations on the hardware itself. Even the cables that you use actually have an impact on throughput or speeds. As an example, you may have heard phrases like Cat5, Cat6, Cat7. They're different category of cables. Now, Cat5 has a limit of 100 megabytes internet speed on it, whereas Cat5e is a gigabit. So actually just picking the wrong cable, even though they sound very similar, can limit your speed to a tenth of their capability. If you do want to check, by the way, most cables are actually labeled. It will say on them, printed in like classic text aerial format, what it is. But you'll need at least Cat5e for modern connectivity. Cat6 and 7 are absolutely fine as well. The other thing to be aware of is how many concurrent connections you can have. So a typical home router will actually start to fail after about 20 devices connect to it. So once you get to a 20, you'll start seeing latency. 50 will probably be the uppermost limit, even though in theory they should be able to issue out 253 IP addresses based on the IP range. That's the number of devices it can hold concurrently. But realistically, anything above 20 on a BT home hub, and you're going to start feeling a little bit rocky. Once you get to about 50, you're going to start running into serious problems. So if you are running your business off a home router, it's worth considering upgrading that. Taking that a step further, higher end mesh systems, which use like Wi-Fi 7, again, would explain these. And they can do about 200 to 300 concurrent connections. And technically on Wi-Fi, the international standard, which is 802.11, really nerdy here, can handle up to 2007 clients per access point. So loads. But again, we're scaling up in enterprise there the further you go, and that one Wi-Fi point doesn't necessarily mean what the router can handle. So there are different pieces in the thing. I won't go into too much detail on that because then all of you will become network engineers, and no one wants that as a career. But effectively, you've got to really understand how the network is structured and how the data and connectivity flows in the business. So from device to wireless access point, probably to switch, probably to patch panel, probably to router, and so on and so forth. There's actually quite a lot of links in the chain. And the more that you have those, the slower the internet speed will go. You have a bit of degradation. There we go. It also does matter how far away you are from the cabinet, by the way, but with fiber, less so. But it is a factor worth considering. In terms of how Wi-Fi actually works, it's a fun one. They're effectively radio signals. Like quite literally, it is a radio channel that broadcasts. That's what you see the little signal strength as coming through. Now that signal strength is measured in dBs, much like classic radio, dB radio. The distance from the access point does make a difference, and it can face obstacles and interruptions, which we'll talk about on the next slide. Most modern Wi-Fi routers come with two modes of Wi-Fi broadcasting. They broadcast on both 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. And you may see at home BT Hub 2.4, BT Hub 5. Now, if you can connect to the 5, do so. It's twice as quick, like the name suggests, because the frequency is closer. If you think of waves, there's more of them condensed. That being said, because it is a higher frequency, it actually won't travel as far, and it's not as good at getting through obstacles like walls. So this is why you have to be aware of these different frequencies. It's also sometimes, if you're mapping it out on a business, what we'll do, we get the floor plan and we lay over these dishes or these circles, if you want, so that we can make sure we've got coverage in all areas to remove any dead spots. And finally, the thing that we have to talk about is channels. Wi-Fi, because it's a radio, broadcasts on different channels. If you think of most action movies where they're talking about, change to channel 7 or anything like that, that's exactly how your Wi-Fi is working. Now, most domestic routers broadcast on the same 4 to 5 channels. So if you're in a relatively dense area, you're actually all overlapping signals with each other quite easily, and that will massively degrade the performance of the internet. So you can log into any router. You can go to advanced settings to Wi-Fi and it will tell you the channels it's using, and it will normally color code them green, amber, red as well for what's available, and you can get it to rotate or change channel quite smoothly. It has no impact on the devices connecting to it, just changes the channel that it's broadcasting on, and that can massively free up traffic. In terms of what interrupts Wi-Fi, again, outside of channels, which does come through, there's actually quite a lot of things that cause problems. We see it in new build buildings. A lot of them are built as what's known as a Faraday cage, which a microwave is a Faraday cage, as an example. It's got a metal mesh that blocks signals coming through. In particular, you see this in larger buildings where there's a massive steel frame structure. That can have huge impact on connectivity, especially on mobile signal. You can always tell if you're in a Faraday cage, if you walk into a building and your mobile signal drops to 0, it's a good sign of how it's been constructed. And that can have a massive impact, as you can imagine, on Wi-Fi. Something we see all the time in Rutland as well, of course, are thick walls and these solid stone walls that we get. The thicker the wall, the more signal it takes to broadcast through it. It is that simple. They are a problem. Now, there are some odd ones as well. Solar panels interrupt Wi-Fi an awful lot. It's very disruptive. If you're put your BT router in the room where the solar panels are on the roof, it can really disrupt the Wi-Fi broadcasting and cause a lot of problems. And the other one which surprises people is running water. So a use example, we did Wi-Fi in a pub, a lovely Rutland pub, there's a lot of them, and the Wi-Fi router was behind the bar, and the flow to the taps, or the pipes coming through, was actually cutting off the Wi-Fi signal from behind the bar to the guests on the guest network. So to put an extra access point in. Being aware of these things means that we can position the Wi-Fi access points, sometimes called WAPs, in different places to make sure that we're covered. Often the best way to do that is by using what's called a mesh network. I told you it would be a crash course in technology, so apologies again. So a mesh network is where, much like the diagram says, you almost have a Venn diagram of signals broadcast. Now, a mesh is quite clever because you can connect not only to one, or the one with the strongest signal, but a true mesh, you can actually do concurrent connections to 2 points at once, so that if one drops, you don't have a problem. Additionally, it means that if you're roaming around on the building, in particular for those of us who work in a larger office, or if you're in a production environment or anything in manufacturing, chances are you're on the phone walking around. When that happens on a traditional network, when you jump from access point to access point, you would actually lose connection. On a mesh, you don't, because it's a concurrent connection as it runs around. With meshes, they can be on different channels, but you've got to make sure that you're monitoring them, because everyone is now broadcasting on the same channel by default. You've created interference within a dense environment. So you've got to be aware of that. And the other thing I see people doing is buying a lot of access points and installing them without them being a mesh. This is causing no end of problems, like I said, because as you roam around, you're not actually on the same network. They're all coming from a different point and it's not being managed coherently. A true mesh does much like the little diagram there shows. It overlaps them and it knows what's going on. It's actually controlled normally by the router. If you want to know how to do this, there's some great examples, but Netgear are quite good at it, and we use Ubiquiti is our recommended provider for anything on network. And Ubiquiti are probably the leading provider for those environments. I'm getting notification pings. Is that you, Romy? No. Okay, fine. It's just me. Ignore me. So yeah, do get a mesh network if you need to cover a certain space or do any roaming, anything like that. It certainly makes a big difference to how you're able to walk around. I've put a little link there to fast.com. It's my favorite speed test because it's really, really simple and it's not full of adverts. So if you go on there, it will tell you internet speed. It literally just gives you the number. It doesn't give you the upload speed, just the download speed. A quick rule of thumb, if you want to do a speed test, is your upload speed is generally 25 to 30% of your download speed. So if you're uploading at 40, your download is 40 meg, your upload would expect to see about 10 to 20, 10 to 15 normally. That being said, if you're running fiber to the premises, they should be the same because it's going through the same trunk, especially on leased line. You shouldn't see any difference between up and down speed. You can check your signal strength on your phone. There's an app called Doctor Wi-Fi and Speed Test by Ookla are two other ones that you can use, and they'll roam around and tell you what's good on your speed. And that's how you can also check your coverage and your channel management. When you are testing Wi-Fi coverage, what we certainly do is we will walk around with a mobile device, running an app and running the Wi-Fi tests in different areas, not just saying, oh yes, my phone says I've still got signal. And the reason is that phones, Apple and Android, aren't very good at updating actual signal strength. Using the little Wi-Fi bars is not a reliable way of gauging that. There are some really good apps for those. I wish I'd written down what my one was called. I'm going to see if I can quickly find it now. Or I cannot, which is typical. I've probably removed it. But yeah, you can use those to sort of test them and see how different devices perform as well. The reason for that is that each device uses a different Wi-Fi card or chip, depending on how modern it is. More modern devices can pick up signals from further away, much like you'd expect. So if you're complaining that the Wi-Fi signal in your home is rubbish, but your children are saying it's absolutely fine, it's probably because you've got an older phone than them. It's that simple. More modern phones are very, very good, in particular iPhones, Pixels, Android, Samsungs. They're all very strong at it, probably better than laptops actually, unless it's probably a MacBook. So you do have to be aware of these pieces as well. The other thing I just wanted to throw out there is that a cabled connection is always quicker than Wi-Fi. Just universally always quicker and better. So if you have the option, cable everything. If you're roaming around, I appreciate it's not viable. It doesn't work for mobile devices, doesn't work for tablets, but desktop computers, laptops, printers, cable is always better. It's consistent and it's guaranteed. You don't have any variations as long as it's the right cable. But yeah, use your cable connections where possible. Common problems that we see, there's a big list. I will go through it, don't worry. What we normally see going on is using a lot of off-the-shelf equipment. So what's known as the ISP, the Internet Service Provider, supplies their router. That's how you get online. That's the gateway, if you want, to the internet. Now, what we would normally do is put another router. A router handles network traffic. I should have been clear on that bit. But we would put another one in as your network. And that's because all ISPs, all internet providers like what's known as a point of demarcation, which is to say they're in charge up to this point. And if you're using the same point of demarcation as them, i.e. the same router, it's very hard to know who's responsible for fixing problems. So if a printer doesn't connect, your internet provider is very unlikely to help you solve that, because from their side, the internet is working and everything's great. There's only so much they'll support with, depending on the agent you get to speak to. On a business setting, they certainly won't be able to support. So we really recommend putting your own network behind it, especially in environments such as serviced offices, because you don't necessarily know how the traffic's being controlled or routed or who's looking after it. That's because there's chances are there's one big router controlling all what's known as VLANs, which are virtual networks within the business, virtual local area networks. Network equipment does need refreshing. It does fail, depending on the type of equipment it is. So do be aware if you haven't done it. It might need a look at. They do burn out as well. So something which is constantly broadcasting will fail. The things which fail the most are known as power line adapters. They're the Wi-Fi broadcasters that plug straight into the plug socket and broadcast from those, or which actually piggyback internet signal across the power cables of a house or building. They burn very quickly because of how much throughput they get. So outside of that, access points then fail, and DRATEC routers collapse probably once every 3 to 4 years as well. So just be aware that things do go wrong, and make sure your network is managed. It is literally how all of your devices speak to the internet. Not having a view of it is a bit wild to me. So make sure you're on a managed network, if appropriate for your business, in some level or another. It's one of those things people often overlook. But effectively, if you don't know, ask, get someone to have a look at it. Everyone is keen to look at networks. There's, broadly speaking, shouldn't be a service charge for managing a network, because once it's set up, it works forever. It's more a case of getting it done right and then making sure someone can access and make changes when needed. Hopefully your MSP, your managed service provider, or your IT provider, not your ISP. Hope that all made sense, and apologies for so much jargon and waffle. Moving on from connectivity, I think I wanted to talk about telephony and what modern phone systems look like compared to classic ones. Modern VoIP, so voice over internet protocol, is where all of the phones do not run off the classic copper lines. They run exclusively over your internet connectivity. That's really useful because it means you don't have to run two separate circuits or two different BT connections. It can all run through one line in and out of the building. You still get a landline number, and you can still dial out from it and control it all. There are, in my mind, two key differences, or three different types, if you want, of running these, but two types of VoIP. One of them is using physical handsets. One of them is using soft phones, which is why I've got desk phones versus soft phones. Now, outside of those, I think there's another point where you've got Microsoft Teams phone, you've got all the other VoIP providers, and then you've got the classic, I want my phones on the desk and it runs with those. So let's start with the one in the middle, which let's start basic, actually. The handsets, everyone's used to them. Physical handset on the desk, very straightforward. It actually works the same way as all the other two that we're going to talk about. So every VoIP carrier works identically. They send internet packets over like a video or voice call we would normally do on, say, Teams or Zoom, translate that to just an audio file, and works directly over the internet with whoever you dial. It's even kind enough to give you a ringtone, even though it doesn't have to. That's it connecting, by the way, into the old BT networks. So you've always got those as an option. They're quite nice. They come on quite a way. They now run on tablets and all sorts of things that you can do, but it is effectively the same it always was. You pick up a handset, you dial some buttons, you do what you've got to do. It still uses VoIP, it's still running the same protocols, and that gives you a level of control that you didn't used to have on traditional telecoms. We'll come on to call flows and those in the future, but effectively you can still manage all your own routing, you can change the display names, you can change the outbound number, you can control direct dials, all of these sorts of elements within VoIP as well. What I would say is that there is a drive within the telecom sector to make it seem extremely complicated and difficult and hard. As someone who works in IT, I'm telling you it is categorically not. It is easy and simple and the most basic IT in the world. When we started doing telecoms, we couldn't believe how simple it was compared to how complex we were told it was. I firmly believe everybody can manage their own VoIP networks if they were just given 10 minutes of training on a portal. It's very intuitive. Now, in between the traditional handsets and Teams phone, you've got what we would call the classic soft phone. It's more of a WebEx experience. They've been around for maybe 5 or 10 years, where perhaps the handset rings on your desktop, it pops up and says you're getting a phone call, and you can answer it on your computer as well when you can wear your headset and talk through that, or anything of those lines. You've got the option regardless. It has the same functionality as the other VoIP. You still have all the controls, all the requirements you need, but it's running through an app on your desktop or mobile device instead. Now that mobile device piece is really useful. You get away from having a physical handset on your phone, on your desk, to using your own mobile phone, installing an application and making your calls out through that. Now you'll need internet or your mobile data, but it will still dial as though you're calling from a landline, 01572 or 01780 for whereabouts we are. We use internally 01572 and 01664, but you can pick up numbers for any range pretty cheaply as well. It's not exactly expensive to buy a new VoIP number, and you can also port or transfer your number from one carrier to another very easily. It's all regulated, which makes it very straightforward. Now, outside of these soft phone apps, you can also now use Microsoft Teams Phone, which is what we use internally. I'm a massive advocate for it. I'll come on to the reasons why, but it is very intuitive for any organization using Teams to start dialing that way as well. It's the application that everyone's using anyway, and it diverts all the calls through it. Now, The downside is it will not work with a physical handset as easily. We certainly don't configure them ourselves. We wouldn't recommend doing so, but you don't need it because most people nowadays own a mobile phone. You can install your app, you can sign in, and you can make all your calls on there instead. It means that if you click on a link anywhere or a phone number on an email or anything, it will ring within Teams. You can dial out, you can transfer, and you can type to people very clearly on Teams and say, are you available for this call? Much easier than you would in any other system where you're sort of leaning over desks and seeing they're available in different rooms or things like that. The other advantage is it means that it is all owned within your Microsoft environment. So if you do currently use 365, you currently own your own emails and domain and tenancy because it's with Microsoft and it's on a monthly contract, much like Teams Phone can be, but your phone number is probably owned by your phone provider. So that's a piece of business property that isn't owned by you, and they can sell your contract to someone else and so forth. Whereas if it's with Microsoft, it is owned in that environment by you categorically, and that's a huge benefit in my mind. So one of the things people often get wrong is basic call flow or call operations. There's a list of things there we can do. So auto attendance, call routing, business hours, voicemail, missed calls, etc. Now you can do a lot in terms of call routing and call flows, depending on the size of the company. You can do a presence-based ringing, which if you take Teams or anything like that, you can do it on handsets as well. It will only call those people who are available rather than anyone who is away, offline, do not disturb, anything like that. You can do call routing by hunt group or department. That is the classic, hello, welcome to Octopus, press 1 for support, press 2 for sales. We'll give you this example. If you press 1 for support, it will ring our first line technicians. After 3 rings or 2 or 3 rings, it goes, oh, they must be busy, and it will also ring the second line technicians. Now, if it rings 2 or 3 times for them as well, and it's still ringing the first line while this is happening, by the way, it will then expand the hunt group and also call Romy and me and anyone else in the business. And if it goes really wrong, it will call Stephen on our side as well in a panic. So it will work its way through everybody on this route that we've set up. This is call routing. Now, the advantage of that is that people want to be heard. So we make sure it try and rings the person who's available to answer the phone in the first instance and then bumps down to the next. What people don't like, however, are robots and complicated auto attendants, and we've all been on those. Please tell me the purpose of your call. Then you've got to state it, and then it tries to repeat it. HMRC is the prime example, where it takes 10 minutes to get through the phone to speak to them. And the same time is having too deep of an auto attendant, which is press 1 for sales, welcome for sales, press 1 for new inquiries, press 2 for existing, welcome to new inquiries, press 1 for hardware, press 2 for. That's a nightmare, and everyone gets really frustrated with it because we're just screaming at it that we want to speak to a person. So highly recommend that you try and streamline these where possible and don't have too many in there. Make sure your voicemails are being handled. Voicemails should be notified of people, not just sat there in the background. Make sure people are emailed and told when they get a voicemail. Set up your business hours. So if someone rings outside of hours, it tells them. The phone doesn't just ring endlessly and you don't know what's going on. It says, our office closed at 5:30. No one's answering the phone. I see this all the time. It really annoys me because I don't know when people close necessarily. And also monitor your missed calls. The advantage people have with VoIP compared to traditional phones is we can see and report on and actually run some data to see how many we're missing calls, what's the delay time between first ring and answer, how often are people within the department answering them. So on our side, I can see which technician answers the most number of calls. It's quite fun, trying to turn it into a competition. But make sure you're optimizing these call flows and reviewing them as well. The other thing, of course, is if you have any hold music on any of the soft phones and on most VoIP platforms, you can upload your own audio file and record that really straightforward. Another advantage of Teams, you can just type in free text what you want the machine to say, and their handy little Copilot Cortana reads it out almost like a human being, still blatantly an AI, but close to it. And at least then you're able to change your messaging fairly often if you've got events going on, or if you're out the office on an event or anything like that, you can update it on the fly. Again, I talked about it earlier, but the telecom sector has traditionally been an absolute nightmare, and I will stand toe to toe with anyone in telecoms and have this conversation. They sign people up from 3 to 7 year contracts for no need at all. They get them tied into it. They put you onto a lease hire purchase of your handsets, which cost £90 to £100 each, and charge you thousands for the privilege. And there is no reason at all. We offer everything from VoIP on handsets to Teams phone and everything in between. They are all monthly commitment contracts. You do not need an annual contract for telecoms. You just don't need it. You sometimes need up to a year for connectivity, but you do not need it for phone and VoIP. So please don't get locked in. The reason is the traditional business model that VoIP providers use, or telecoms providers. They build up a bank of contracts and then they sell their business out. They've got guaranteed residual income and they do it again and they do it again. And they tell everyone it's really complicated and only they can do it. It's nonsense. You really don't need to be locked in any way. You can be very flexible with it. What I also think people don't understand is that if you're buying telecoms from a telecoms provider, chances are they own your phone number. If you don't pay your bill or you fall out with them, they will hold that phone number over you and not release it even though they should. So make sure that that phone number is transferred within or owned by you on the contract. And the nice way of doing that is making sure it's owned by the Microsoft environment in Teams Phone. It's why I'm such a huge advocate of it. That, and I'm a nerd, I like using apps, right? But using Teams means that you own your own business IP. Losing your inbound inquiry phone number is quite impactful. Making sure that that can't happen matters. The other thing is make sure you know what you're actually paying for. BT bill auditing is something we do for free because they're a sod to work with. So if you don't know, or if you find your telecoms bills confusing, send them to Romy or me. We'll go through them, tell you exactly what you've got. What normally happens when we see is that people are paying for 5 to 10 numbers when they only need 1 or 2. And that's because historically over time they've built up from every BT broadband circuit to a fax number and the main line up to the DDIs for each VoIP. So, and sorry if they were at all technical, but you end up normally paying for more line hire or line rental than you actually need. Send it through, or if you don't understand, query it with the provider. That's also the option. I would say with modern comms, you can be flexible. I don't like people being locked into contracts. I don't think it should be the case, and you shouldn't be in that position either. We see it all the time. So if you are one of those people, make sure you aren't next time. Poor little octopus carrying all those chains. Yeah, so just make sure you've got some flexibility, and if not, challenge your ISP. Getting out of those contracts is nigh on impossible, so it may be something you can only look at renewal date. In terms of what we recommend, hopefully we've covered it, but make sure you've got some good networking equipment in place. Make sure that it is owned by you, that it is modern. Make sure you've got some good Wi-Fi coverage. Make sure you've got your VoIP owned by you. Make sure if you need it, you've got resilience or backups built into your data connectivity. The if you need it part there is huge. If you're a small organization of 2 to 5 employees, chances are you can all just go to the coffee shop around the corner and use the guest Wi-Fi safely rather than using your own internet. If it's out for a little bit, but do play with it. Similarly, if you all work from home, it might be easier to go somewhere else or go to a cafe rather than worrying because BT's playing outside. And review it every 6 months to every year. Review what you've got, review what you're paying for. Most people have a provider and stay with them for 5 years upwards for internet connectivity. The price goes up every year. We shrug it off. We don't know what we're actually getting. Have a look at it, see if it's fit for purpose. The technology has moved on quite a lot, and it is very cheap now to get very fast speeds. Certainly on a residential domestic side, you should be getting 300 to 500 megabits per second, probably for about £50 to £60 a month. And on a business side, it's not that much more either. But even on a lease line, you can probably get a lease line from about £200, which is a purely dedicated trunk. And they're extremely high. They used to cost about £2,000 a month. They're down to about 200 now, depending on availability. So just make sure you're reviewing those every time they come up. In terms of how to make sure you've got good connectivity, well, there's the checklist. If you're running into any problems, let us know. Do remember what we talked about at the start with those Wi-Fis and meshes. We see it all the time, especially with the solar panels. It's always overlooked, and it's not something people often look at. If you want a good takeaway from this outside of internet, have a look at your call flow, your auto attendant, map it out on paper as a basic process. If someone calls, what happens? If it's a company growth plan, and at the moment the phone rings and it rings everybody, that won't be supported long term for growth because everyone's going to be busy, and you'll end up with an environment where people don't want to answer the phone because they know it's not for them. So those sorts of things when it comes to scale and growth are important. Have a think of those setups, have a look at those contracts, work out what they look like. And if you need a backup, have a look at those as well. And I hope that in some way taught someone something.
Thank you very much, John. If you have any questions, please put them down in the chat. I'll be happy to answer them, but I've received some emails. So I've got one asking, is it worth working from desk phones to Teams phone or cloud calling for a small business?
I think so. Again, using the backup option there, if you take your classic desk phone, when your internet goes off, you have to sort of go in there and put a cool divert on, sometimes contact the provider, do these things. The advantage of having it on a soft phone, so either on WebEx or on Teams, is that it isn't necessarily reliant on the connectivity to where the phone is, because you've got mobile signal, you've got Wi-Fi, you can roam with it much easier. So personally, as you know, Romy, I'm a big fan of Teams phone, but if not, for me, soft phone is a happy medium, and desk phone has its place, but only if you physically like pushing the buttons. Romy, you and I shared an office for a long time, so you know that I pace around them on the phone anyway. Holding a handset on a string never worked for me. But yeah, I would recommend a move to Teams phone, or at least investigating it, because it's so cost competitive compared to what it used to be as well.
Yeah. So how do we know if our Wi-Fi coverage is actually good enough across the whole office?
Normally, people love to whinge about it, as bad as that sounds. So people are your canary down the mine for if my connection's good enough. If not, use a speed test app on your mobile phone, stand in the four corners of the office and see if you're getting dropouts. You can also ask a nerd. We can do what's called a packet loss test, which is where we will get it to send tiny bytes of data consistently over a period of like 5 minutes and see if there's any dropouts. Because what you may see is really great signal that goes in and out. That's channel interference is a classic one. So even though it says you've got really strong signal, you might still be having dropouts, and just trying to understand those. It's relatively complex to try and tell someone how to decipher it and get past it. Again, Robbie, as you know, anytime we've done these, it's not a quick fix. There's normally quite a lot going on, and you generally have to take a pause and go, right, is this actually appropriate for the size of business or what's needed before we go off on one? Because we're nerds, we get excited. But I would say walk around, run some speed tests, go from there.
I've got one from Luke asking, rather than slow Wi-Fi, we experience Wi-Fi outages where it can jump in and out. Is there a likely reason why or way that I can test easily?
Sure. So the first thing to see if we're seeing Wi-Fi outages is if you've got any radio interruptions. So, for example, do you have two wireless access points which are competing rather than meshed? And what could be happening there is that your device in question is confused as to which. Luke, I hope you don't mind me saying it's GTT wireless, but if you don't know which, let's say it's ABC Corp, if it's ABC Corp on this access point or ABC Corp on that one. You guys in particular have banging Wi-Fi, Luke. So of course it's broadcasted quite strongly. But if you've got more than one access point, they might be overlapping and then jumping from one to the other. So it could be something like that. It could be channel interruption. You're in a serviced office. There's a lot of dense access points together. So having those that channel broadcasting, if you look into the router or the access point, see what channels it's doing or do some channel analysis, it will show you from there. Ubiquiti have some great tools for this. Speed Test by Ookla has an app, Ookla. It's full of adverts, those speed tests, so just be cautious. I'm sure there's one called Dr. Wi-Fi as well on the Apple Store, which will mark different interruptions and channel strength at different points. But for outages, they're my starting point. What's the infrastructure? Why is it failing? What interruptions are we getting? Sounds like overlap on channel or access points, though.
And I've got another one asking, how often should businesses review their internet, Wi-Fi, or phone setup?
I would say once a year, just ask the question as a minimum. At the very minimum is once a year, how's it working? But when people, like, let's take Luke's example there, if we're experiencing outages now, if we're having problems with it, it's a good time to stop and try and work out what can be done. And that could be anything from running a test on your device, speaking to if it's a serviced office, speaking to them, or if you've got an IT provider, speak to those as well. I see we've also got a Q&A from Belinda.
Yeah,
sorry, I've just seen that one pop up, so I thought I'd jump on that.
Same as well.
Go on then, Romy, read it out.
If I can see it, wait. It doesn't. Go on, read it.
So Belinda says, we have a serviced office who supplies our broadband. How safe is our data? Interesting point. Very hard to say. So theoretically, they could sit between you and the internet and look at every single piece of traffic and data. They wouldn't, because it would be a massive violating breach and they'd go to prison. So it's probably pretty safe. There's no requirement for them to do it. The risk more is that you aren't in charge of your own connectivity or network infrastructure. So for example, in a serviced office, you can't physically, it sounds daft, but you can't see the box where it all happens. I know the King Center, I know where the box is. And alongside it are connections for 20 other businesses. And it'd be very difficult to point to what's yours. The risk there is that if anyone gains access to that cupboard, I can plug in a USB stick or an Ethernet port and monitor all of the traffic of every business. And because there's so many different businesses, no one can take ownership and say who owns what. That's the biggest risk in serviced office, is this network shadowing, if you want, sticking a I can't remember what is that, a tracker or a bug effectively on the network and monitoring everything that goes through it. It's unlikely. We are small businesses in Rutland in a managed office by the council. It's very unlikely that's the place. But because we can't physically control it, it poses a bit of a risk. I would say just ask them. But yeah, it is what it is. You're probably pretty safe though.
I think that's it. I've got nothing else on my side. I don't know if anybody else has any questions, but thank you very much for asking them and for joining us today. We're going to have the recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel. I'm going also to send it into our newsletter next week. So feel free to go back to it if there is anything that you want to rewatch or anything that was unclear. If anything is unclear, of course, you can email us. If you want to go down the slide, John, you've got our contact details there. So if anything is unclear, or you have questions about what we talked about or anything else related to IT and connectivity, laptop, computers, all of that, just shout. We'll be happy to help you. Thank you very much, John, for today. That was great.
Always. I hope it wasn't too technical.
No, it was all right. It was technical, but I think hopefully everybody understood it and you made it very understandable. So thank you very much. And we'll probably have another webinar possibly at the end of June. We need to put a date on and find the topics.
I do know what the topic is.
Oh God!
Which is going to sorry, we're going to do an update on how to best use Teams and 365, because I had a couple of people ask me about that literally within the last week, and I thought actually if people are asking, that's what we'll talk about. So if you want to do the next webinar, how to get the most out of 365 and Microsoft Teams.
Perfect. There you go. You got our next topic. So I'm going to find the date and I'll send that over on everywhere. Newsletter, LinkedIn. Keep an eye on it. Thank you so much, everybody. And yeah, have a lovely afternoon. Enjoy the sun.
Thanks for coming. Bye, everyone.
Cheers. Bye-bye.